Welcome to Policy on Demand. I'm Sindhu Blume. Shortly after the start of the pandemic in 2020, PwC launched the Pulse surveys. These surveys gauged C-suite sentiment around issues which arose as a result of or were altered by the pandemic. And our latest iteration of this survey focuses on the workforce. And joining me to break down those results are Bhushan Sethi and Julia Lamm, both joining me from New York. Bhushan and Julia, welcome.
Hi, Sindhu. Great to be with you.
All right, a very quick note about this survey. It was conducted between August 2nd and August 5th. There were 752 executives who responded, all from Fortune 1000 companies. All right, with that, Bhushan and Julia, I've got a question for you. So I am in the DC studio. The two of you are in the New York studio. You look great, and I'm delighted to see you there. But the three of us all took the same route to get here, which was walking into an office building through the lobby door, getting in an elevator, and getting into the studio. I want to find out from you this morning, how did you feel walking in the lobby door?
Sure, I mean, it felt great. There's contact tracing set up here, so I've got my phone on me at all times. I've seen a couple people. The office isn't too crowded, but there's definitely people here. It's exciting to be back.
Yeah, and wearing a mask when we're around other people is normal, but it felt energizing walking in and taking that elevator up and following our safety protocols. And it's just nice to be around colleagues again and great to be in the studio.
For me, I had a little pep in my step, I have to say, and there was a little bit of joy. And I think the three of us are aligned on how we felt this morning walking into the building. But not everyone during this time or now feels that way about going back to the office. They're perfectly happy being at home. And this is a big challenge for companies and speaks to some of the questions that were asked in the survey. And, what is that challenge for corporations? How do you work in this environment where not everybody necessarily will be back in the office? So with that, why don't we kick it off with the first question about the survey? I want to find out what really stood out for you or what surprised you in the results of this survey. Julia?
The one stat related to that really stuck out to me was that 2/3 of the executives believe that companies should be mandating vaccines. So I'll get right into the controversial stuff quick and early here. But that seemed pretty high in terms of what we're seeing across the country around vaccinations, vaccination trends, and feelings against that.
Bhushan?
Yeah, similarly, I was surprised by the alignment between employers and employees around that vaccine mandate. So 2/3 of employees and employers, as Julia said, are comfortable and think that there should be mandated vaccines as part of return to office. I was also quite surprised around the alignment between employers and employees around things like retention. So 2/3 of employees are out there looking for jobs, and 90% of executives that we polled actually said they've experienced higher turnover. And when we probed into that data, they said people are leaving because of base compensation and flexibility. So there's various degrees of alignment, more so than we've seen in previous surveys.
So let's get into the office. One of the things that we keep hearing about is a hybrid format. Julia, could you talk about this and focus on what you found in the survey and what companies are doing? How are they addressing this?
Sure, yeah, we asked in the survey what were the biggest challenges to maintaining and establishing a hybrid working model. So the top three results that came out of it were, first of all, corporate culture. More than 70% said that was in the highest categories of a concern around making a hybrid model work. And that goes back to the executives wanting to be back in the office, having teams together. Next up was mentoring. And I know even here at PwC, we've been hearing that amongst our more junior employees. They want to be learning from people on their teams. They want to be together to have some of those learning by osmosis moments. And it's just not the same, especially for new joiners, people who have joined the firm in the last 16 months and never met a coworker. So that was the second on the list. And the third was innovation. And we always hear about this whole water cooler talk, all of the spontaneous collaboration that happens in the office. Those seem to be the top three concerns that executives had around hybrid models and why they want people to be coming back.
And one of the big concerns around remote work has been and continues to be threats around cybersecurity. Bhushan, what did the survey show about that?
Yeah, I mean, it showed, and other surveys and experiences we've had, Sindhu, show that security is a reason why people are looking to either stay kind of in the office for certain roles that are dealing with sensitive data, high degrees of risk, and also why they're looking to move certain roles back because there's been a strain on a number of remote working systems that people have been using. So, but again, all the cyber hygiene that we've been seeing since the start of the pandemic around training people around phishing, around emails, around good protocols, having kind of good policies in place, being clear around what devices you're using, not downloading kind of certain software that's not approved. All of those basic table stakes now continue to be important for our clients.
Okay, thanks for that. And Julia, let's talk about turnover and how has turnover, and I think in some industries it's probably a little bit more than others, but how's that affected operations as well as employee retention?
Yeah, I mean, turnover is a huge issue right now. And Bhushan mentioned the data earlier around more than 80% of executives said that they're seeing higher turnover than the previous survey. So we're definitely seeing that. We're reading about it in the media. But why does that really create an operational impact for our clients? And the biggest reason is when someone leaves, time to replace, time for people to become productive. In many cases, especially for knowledge roles, the time to be productive can be 6 months or even longer. So it takes a real impact on the workforce when you see turnover numbers go up. There's also risk around, lost knowledge. Maybe you can't find something the employee did. We're seeing companies do more investment in documenting processes so that they diminish the risk and the dependency on individuals and the knowledge that they carry. So these are the kind of things we're seeing around that turnover. And of course, many companies are doubling down on the employee experience. They're looking at comp, they're looking at development opportunities people are getting to try to make sure that they're retaining people before they even decide to, entertain another offer.
And Bhushan, what about the impact of turnover on revenue?
Yeah, so as Julia said, when we asked the question about strategic priorities, the two biggest issues that the executives said were, we want to redesign our work, which includes automation of work because of that reliance on the individuals. And we also want to engage in more robust strategic planning, given all of the uncertainty that we see around the place, externally and internally. And so because of that, companies are now saying, how do I think about redesigning supply chain? How do I think about changes in tax policy? How do I think about accelerating the digital journey that I'm on so that I'm not overly reliant on key individuals? So all of those will have an impact on the growth agenda. And again, as we've talked about before, it's going to be different for different industries. Those human contact industries that rely on reopening at scale are going to need to kind of really focus on customer safety, employee safety as part of their reopening, and others are going to look at more digital business models.
And Bhushan, I want to stay with you for this next question. Over the course of the past 15 months, challenges around not only employee retention, but what are some tactics, what are some strategies to help employees and honestly, just to maintain morale, but what are some initiatives that you've learned about through the survey, and also curious what you're talking about with companies in terms of diversity and inclusion, for example?
Yep. So one of the things about hybrid work, which is a real challenge, is remote work inequity. And we've actually been talking about this, and I think we first polled on it in March, and now people are still talking about it now and probably will be for the next 6 months, because it's a real challenge in the way work is done and the way that we interact. We joked at the start about loving returning to the office, but for those people who are not going to come back, or maybe only going to come back 1 or 2 days a week, it's going to be a challenge because of the innate proximity bias that we have as humans. So as leaders, we need to deprogram ourselves. We need to be much more inclusive. We need to change the way we work. We need to be thinking about more asynchronous ways of working, where we don't all have to be in the same meetings, in the same physical location, on the same time zone, and really think about how we can design around work to meet everyone's needs, whether they're in the office full-time or whether they're working hybrid. That's why this hybrid work, as we've talked about, is going to be so tricky, because it's a real commitment. Like that's hard work managing in that hybrid way. I also think, Sindhu, there's so many connections between how we're living and working these days. We see mental health challenges in sporting events. We see them in the workplace. The reopening impacts our children in summer camps, our children going to schools, the opening of Broadway theatres, and obviously our workplaces. So never before have there been so many interlinkages between how we live and work. And I just think it's a real tricky time for us in the workplace and in our communities to kind of manage this in the right inclusive, non-divisive, non-politicized way. It's much easier said than done.
And I think
And
just
that,
to add
sorry,
on
go
to
ahead.
that, just to add on to what Bhushan's saying, we've got a number of teams right now who are already in a hybrid working model. Some people are on site, they're there with our clients. Some people are off site for personal reasons. They don't feel comfortable traveling yet, or they may have a situation where they can't get vaccinated, so they don't feel comfortable, whatever the reason. But we've been putting in place a number of mechanisms to make sure the people who are virtual are included. And it's very, very easy to quickly forget, even just sitting here, Bhushan and I are in person. Sindhu, you're not in the room with us. We had a catch up before you got on, and then we're trying to make sure we're doing the same thing with you. Same thing with teams. We make sure they're all available and able to access video. We make sure there's someone in the room who is actually designated to be walking around with a camera to show what work is being done on the walls. We're transposing the things on the wall to a virtual environment. There's a lot of things you have to put in place and additional mechanisms, and it's just being thoughtful about that, but it does take more time, and managers need to really prioritize that.
And those adjustments have also shifted over to the physical spaces. I mean, companies are thinking about their offices differently and how to position people in there and how to create an environment where there's collaboration happening, socialization, connectivity. So Julia, how is that addressed in the survey?
Yeah, the survey found some similar things to what you're describing around the trends. Companies are looking at using their real estate very differently in the future. They're redesigning office spaces now. They're thinking about leases that are coming up. Do we really need that space? We're also seeing a trend towards more of a hub and spoke model and less reliance on HQ, on headquarters, and more reliance on satellite offices and things like that. So a lot of creativity in the real estate and facilities management space right now.
And let's talk about trends around initiatives in the office and with the workforce. Bhushan, could you address that and what the survey found, as well as what you've been talking about with companies?
Yeah, so the here and now of this topic is obviously about returning to the office. It's a real contentious topic that manifests itself in safety and confidence and vaccines and should we wear masks, and we've seen a number of companies push out their reopening dates. I think a couple of things in the survey that are interesting is we asked people in January about their, wanting to be full-time remote. 29% people said full-time remote in January post-pandemic. We asked that same question now to the same population. It's over 40%. So that number is ticking up. But we also have to juxtapose that on the fact that if we look at BLS data from July, that is trending down. We're down to just 14% of people, of the American workforce, teleworking. So we've got this whole disconnect between some companies pushing out reopening dates and this slow crawl back to the office for knowledge workers and the essential workers who were there. And it's a real challenge for organizations that have two tiers of workers. And then I'd say longer term, the fact that companies are now looking at how does macroeconomic trends impact us? What does a higher inflation rate mean for us? How does geopolitical tensions around the world, the lack of supply chain components in the automotive industry, how does that impact our supply chain, whether we're a bank financing it or whether we're a manufacturer helping in the development of it? So the firms are looking kind of at both the now of work and the future of work in a connected way. But again, there's this messy set of 6 to 12 months that we just got to get through with return to office and retention and vaccines and even vaccine boosters and firms' roles in that, which are going to be getting a lot of interest from our clients. And that's why the HR leaders, Sindhu, actually said one of their biggest priorities over the next 3 to 6 months is trying to drive more adoption and around vaccines. As firms mandate vaccines, business leaders and HR leaders in this case actually see they have a big role in driving kind of the adoption of vaccines.
All right, why don't we end with priorities for the next 3 to 6 months and then 6 to 12 months? Julia, why don't we start with you?
Sure. It's definitely employee engagement and trying to keep employees. That seems like one of the top, as well as the other issue around vaccines, how you bring people back to the office, getting people in person to collaborate and connect. And obviously those two are related. You know, if you have a team, you feel a sense of camaraderie, you have a social connection with them, you might be less likely to be looking for another job, because that's part of it, right? People want to be with people that they enjoy working with. So those two are coming out of the survey as some of the highest priorities for the next 3 to 6 months.
And I'll just double down on the next 3 to 6 months about the redesign of work or the simplification of work. How do you prioritize and say no to certain things? How do you stop certain work? How do you automate certain work? How do you prioritize certain kind of clients or product launches? Firms are going to have to do that because that's going to manage well-being and burnout. And then longer term, it's going to be, you know, how do we think about our digital footprint? How do we think about our revenue models? But right now it's about simplifying work for people's well-being and retention, as Julia described.
Bhushan and Julia, thank you so much for walking through the survey results. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
And to our audience, thank you as always for spending this time with us. More information about the latest Pulse survey, as well as about policy on demand, is included in the description of this episode. Take care.